Hello and welcome to Reawaken the Girl Within. I'm really excited to have you. My name is Laura, and I will be your host over the coming few sessions with some incredible guests that we have lined up. So, Reawaken the Girl Within is really centered around International Day of the Girl, which is coming up on Monday, the 11th of October. And as we celebrate girls all around the world, I thought it would be fantastic to celebrate girls of all ages. So, regardless of your background, your age, to reawaken and to reconnect with that girl within you. What does that mean? That means tapping into the part of you that's fun, that's adventurous, the part of you that's a dreamer. And so we'll be exploring all of those things, the possibilities, all of those things that we dream of as little girls. And how do we express that? How do we explore that? How do we bring our full self to the table as women at any and all ages? International Day of the Girl is celebrated on October 11th to celebrate the achievements and the potential of girls. The day aims to highlight and to address the needs and the challenges that girls face while promoting girls' empowerment and the fulfillment of their human rights. This day focuses on girls because of the disproportionate gender-based discrimination that girls face every day. And the theme for 2021 is Digital Generation, Our Generation. And therefore, to kick us off, today I will be joined by the amazing Nadine Valdes. We'll be talking about growing up into this internet generation because as she was coming into the cusp of childhood, going through the teenage years, the internet was beginning to come into its own, beginning to proliferate for everyone around the world. And so she's had those experiences growing up. And also she is raising a daughter in this digital world. And so I thought it would be fantastic to have Nadine come on and we talk about the opportunities and also the dangers that women and girls face online. Whether that's the effects of social media on identity and self-esteem, all through to some of the darker places, whether that's harassment, grooming, and other predatory online behavior. So I'd like to welcome Nadine. Hi, Nadine. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for our session today.
Thanks for being here. I think you're one of my favorite people to hang out with over the last couple of years, and not just because of the pandemic. I think even without the pandemic, you'd still be one of my favorite people to hang out with. And I appreciate you coming on and exploring some of these different ideas and aspects. So I thought as we just get started, maybe you could tell us a little bit about Nadine, the girl within you. What were you like growing up?
Oh my gosh, Laura, that really takes me back. Growing up, I was kind of like the weird kid. So sorry, it's okay. I was curious, my screen froze a little bit. But yeah, I was a weird kid. I read a lot. I've always been an introvert. And so, yeah, growing up was kind of strange in a way. Like I was kind of an outsider, but I was also fairly well liked. So I kind of treaded a lot of different spaces. I was very awkward. I went through a period of deep depression. I hung out with all kinds of different people. Like teachers liked me. I got good grades. I was a class leader. So, I held leadership positions in school. But on the side, I had a lot of friends who had very interesting experiences. My parents divorced when I was 10. So I hung out with a lot of the kids that came from kind of single families or what people call were broken homes. And these were a lot of, you would call them troubled kids, maybe. Very smart, very bright. I went to an all-girls school, so everyone was really headstrong, very feminist. I think that was kind of the environment that I grew up in, and that kind of showed me all the different possibilities of also what kids can get up to. Which is why, you know, now I have a daughter, I have a 5-year-old. I'm so super aware of like all the things that can happen, or that could happen to her in a lot of different ways, and what goes on behind that. Because these kids were also my friends, you know. Yeah. Does that make
I
sense?
think it does. And I think it's fascinating, right? Because sometimes you hear like the introverts and people hold themselves back because they're like, I'm introverted. And yet you're talking about your experiences being a leader and actually having different groups of friends and somehow managing to navigate between those worlds. And so I think I think that's also maybe one of the things that comes up, right, as we grow, that we internalize some of the stories about what we can't be, or you know what we can't do because of who we are. I wonder, are there any maybe personality traits that you've had, or things that you know you had as a kid that you've either grown out of or grown more into?
I think growing up in a girls' school was actually a real blessing. It's something that I look back quite fondly on, and would probably do the same for my own daughter in a lot of ways, because I think even my friends to navigate some of the situations that we found ourselves in that I think otherwise might have been even more dicey. Like we didn't deal with a lot of misogyny because it's an all girls school, so everybody, there were no boys to benchmark against. We all held roles. And the general environment was to raise strong women, whatever that means. Okay. Think about strong women. Like the title of today's talk is Raising Strong Women, right? Strong girls. And the thing about that is they're going to be challenging, they're going to be difficult. They're going to talk back, they're going to resist, they're going to do all of these things. Like I call myself a rebel women coach, right? And a lot of that is actually inspired by kind of that background, because those were my friends, like rebel girls, you know, who wanted to challenge society, wanted to challenge how things were, and were very much in what would you call it? Like subculture. Were on the fringe, were on the edges. Those were the people that I was really interested in. Those were the people that I resonated with. And, you know, looking back, I guess I could say that I was one of them, right? So that was very much kind of the environment that I grew up in, and the kind of people that I grew up with. And the thing about that was, like you said, I was growing up in at the cusp of the internet. This was when there was still GeoCities and chat rooms. Okay, I still remember the first chat room was Alamak. You probably went there. It was like Singapore and maybe Malaysia. If you're listening and you actually know what that is, please leave a message in the comments, because that would be amazing. But that was
Back before the
so
internet
long
was
ago.
global. It was the
You know?
internet was local before it was global.
There were like the starter chat rooms, then there was IRC, and then there was ICQ, and there was like all of these things, Friendster, MySpace. I mean, these were all like the beginnings of social media as we know it, of network, like social networks as we know it. So we were starting to see that, but thankfully I was not, like, we didn't have to deal with that at that point of time. I am till today grateful that there was no Instagram and Facebook when I was a teenager, because I think it would have been very, very terrible to have my teenage self immortalized on Facebook. Would probably be fairly scary. And it makes me wonder for the generations, you know?
Yeah, I think we'll get to that in a bit, because I think that's a huge point. The idea of growing up with your life pretty much in everyone's faces, and once something's on the internet, you really can't take it back, so to speak. So, but maybe before that, tell us about your experiences, right? As you said, you were growing up in this emerging internet generation, ICQ and all of that. What were some of your experiences like? How do you think that shaped you?
it shaped me in a really big way. And in so many ways, I am eternally grateful that that was happening as I was growing up, because that's how I made new friends. A lot of times I made so many friends on the internet. Most of my good friends were from the internet, because it gave me the opportunity to just chat with people on the basis of our interests. I was very lucky. Okay. Looking back as an adult now and looking back at my teenage self and that kind of situation makes me go like, wow, I could have very easily been in extremely unsafe situations. But I wasn't. I made friends who, didn't ask ASL. For those of you who don't know, ASL means age, sex, location, which is the general greeting if you are meeting people online. I don't know if that's the case right now, but I personally was never interested in that. Even as a teenager, even as a young person, it was not interesting to me. So I made most of my friends due to common interests. That said, a lot of my friends were out there chatting with people, and the thing about that is, I think we realized very early on, and we were maybe 12 years old, and some of my friends were getting personal computers. And without a lot of supervision, I don't know if people understood yet the potential hazards of an internet connection. Okay, this was back when there was dial-up and people were still learning how to build web pages. I still remember. And here's the thing that I'm present to about young, like kids, right? Where there's intelligence, where there's curiosity, and an internet connection, anything is possible. And that means literally anything, any kind of trouble that you can possibly imagine, has a way of, like a kid can find it. My friends, I mean, by the time they were 11 or 12, and again, this was even before Google, okay, they could find porn on the internet. I still remember. It was remarkable. And when I think back on some of my old friends, I mean, I do think that some of them might have had quite traumatic situations that I didn't know about because I was a kid. But looking back, there was signs, like if I break it down like that, they could have had some traumatic experiences that they were looking for these things at such a young age. But the fact is, I also understand that, that's something that children can be exposed to these days, even with parental filters. Just because even if you're a great parent and you want to protect your kid and you make sure that nothing enters their zone, they're going to go into school. Their friend's going to have a cell phone or something on their laptop, and they're going for studying or whatever, and their friend could show it to them. Like, you really don't know what a child has access to anymore. And this was, again, like more than 20 years ago. I can only imagine right now how much more intense that has gotten, how much more likely that is to happen.
Absolutely. And I think oftentimes, I know even for myself, being in the digital space, like we often focus on the possibilities. You can reach the world. You literally have the world at your fingertips. Google is now, you're like praying to God for an answer, and all you need to do is ask Google, and you get your answer downloaded to you. But at the same time, as you said, there are some real dangers with online. And I think this is something that has become more and more both emergent over time, that we've become more conscious of the dangers of being online. But at the same time, maybe because it's so commonplace, it's so ubiquitous now, we take it for granted, and sometimes we maybe let our guard down with some of the things that are happening online. So what are some of those things that maybe we should be thinking about, and we should be bringing to the forefront, even as we integrate technology more and more into our lives?
For sure. I think it could possibly be one of the biggest parenting challenges any of us are ever going to face, right? Because we can't ignore Instagram, we can't ignore YouTube, we can't ignore Facebook. You have numerous success stories, right? Like Kylie Jenner builds a $1 billion empire on social media for her makeup. You know, she becomes an influencer. Tons of teenagers are making millions and driving nice cars because, you know, they're successful influencers, for example. Or they start a successful YouTube channel from the time they're 6 years old, like Ryan's World or something like that. So there's all this possibility where, you know, people or children from the time they're really, really young can already start making money. Okay. And that brings questions like, if my daughter is inclined towards YouTube, like she wants to be a YouTube star or she wants to be an Instagram star, and she's good at it and she gets millions of followers, let's say, or thousands of followers, is that a good thing, or is that something that I should be protecting her around? And to be honest, the answer isn't that straightforward, because yes, I mean, like, you know, my daughter, right, she's 5 years old and she's already learned thanks to YouTube, how to tell people to like and subscribe her videos. And she was very inspired by some of the kids on YouTube, and she wanted to do science experiments on YouTube and have her own YouTube channel. And she's 4 or 5 years and very adorable. Okay, very adorable. My husband and I are like thinking about this and going like, if we just did this, you know, she might be a multimillionaire. Like, she might be able to pay for her school. We might be setting her up for, you know, entrepreneurship. She might have her own empire by the time she's 15. I mean, do we stand in the way of that? Like, what do we do? Right? But on the other hand, I'm also aware that she can't knowingly consent, because if I put her images out there, they're out there for good. And whatever comes from that, whether she is bullied, whether, you know, like what comes from all the attention that she might get, or any of those things, like, does she know what could happen if she's 5 years old, 6 years old, even, or a child? And like, how do I weigh that? You know, we decided that we wouldn't do that because we didn't feel comfortable kind of putting her out there at such a young age, even though she would have been so super adorable. But we didn't feel comfortable with it, and we'll probably wait till she's older and she's more aware, and we can explain to her, like, okay, if you do this, this is what happens. Like, the idea, even the concept of public, you know, will she be happy if she goes out into a mall and everybody recognizes her? You know, like, there's all these other implications.
I think that's something a lot of parents are grappling with now, just managing this balance between, as you said, consent and autonomy. And you're forced to think about these things when they are so young. Is she consenting? Is she ready to be, you know, be in such a public view, even from such a young age? And even maybe when she's older, as you said, like, does she really want all of her baby photos to be online? But as a parent, those are things that maybe you haven't thought about. How will that affect them in the future? And at the same time, you're also, you know, like you said, am I holding my child back from fulfilling their dreams? But I think there's also, there is also a thriving industry of people stolen identities and all of that. I mean, you just need to be on Facebook for a very short time to get, you know, friend requests with familiar names and photos, but then you know that that's not the person behind that. So that's actually happened even within my immediate family, where the hackers hacked into Facebook. She lost access to her email, and people have actually sent money in response, because Facebook is so people trust Facebook so much that if I'm messaging you and I'm contacting you, if you are in distress and you're someone I know, I will respond if I'm able to. So those are some of the dangers that are out there. I know, at least even for myself and my husband, we've seen ourselves in random magazines and websites with a completely fabricated story that sometimes we just look at and we're like, what on earth is going on? So and if we want to go a bit darker, then you have, you know, photos of children being put out there. And I think those are real concerns as a parent.
Yes. Yes, and to be honest, it's a topic that is difficult to talk about because we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to think about the dangers that might be out there. So many people, especially during this pandemic, depend on devices, myself included, for our kid. Right, we depend on the online world to kind of keep them entertained. Sometimes when we need some time to do work or peace and quiet or whatever. But the fact of it is that there are so many dangers, and absolutely, one of the things that you brought up is a really big thing, which is, privacy, right? Like people taking your identity, taking your pictures, discovering where you live. I was just watching this piece where there was like cyber stalking, for example, even kidnapping, it could be from a picture that you posted and said, oh, this is my kid with their best friend, and they go to this school, and we were just at this ice cream store or whatever. All of that information and putting it public has consequences that sometimes people are not aware of. And yeah, bringing it into girls specifically, that because unfortunately women are very much the main targets very often when they put themselves out there in any way, shape, or form. It's usually children, or women, girls, that are most affected by this. So when girls that get doxxed, what's called doxxed, so when someone online basically doesn't like your face or doesn't like what you're saying, or gets it into their head that they're entitled to a piece of you because your image is on the internet for whatever reason, and they decide to go hunt you down and hunt down like your house address, your home address. People get threats. I've actually heard of this from people that I know and that I've even worked with, who, yeah, are like genuinely afraid of making it big because like they have gotten threats. And this can happen to anybody. So that is definitely concerning.
It is. So, what are some of the other things that maybe people need to be thinking about? Maybe as they have kids who are online, giving them access to devices. So, as you said, on the one hand, you have like maybe cyber stalking and doxing, but sometimes they may be innocuous activities that children or teenagers find themselves in. I know sometimes it's like chat rooms, and now you have Snapchat, where you have no idea at what age the person that you're interacting with. I think the famous saying is, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. So it's like no one knows your age, your gender, your motives. So what can parents do to help their kids kind of begin to navigate this well, to protect them? Because
That's a
yeah,
really
it
great
can be very
question.
dangerous.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and something that I've thought about since I had a child, because I knew what could happen. Very, very acutely, I knew what could happen, right? And the internet, like nobody knows who you are, and that can work out in a good way and in a bad way. And the good way was I was able to connect with people, who didn't know my age, who didn't know that I was a kid. If anything, I catfished them, um, because I was very young and I was talking to people who were a lot older than me, but they didn't know how old I was, so I could just have conversations about philosophy, music without judgment. And that was great. But at the same time, like, yes, you can be harmed by people because you don't know how old they are, you don't know what their intentions are, and all of these things. So how do you protect kids? And here's the thing that I really feel very strongly about. And when we look at abuse, or when children are taken advantage of, or they have a tough time on social media, right? Like there was a recent report that social media is super toxic, particularly Instagram on young girls. So for me, the key here is in whether or not there's communication between the parents and the child, and whether the child is aware of themselves, is aware of when they feel uncomfortable, for example. Do they know the rules? Do they know what they can do to protect themselves? Do they know that they can say no? So consent. Um, all of these things are actually really, really important. There's so much to this. And you can Google like basic steps, right? Like parental filters. Okay. So that's like step one. Controlling the sites, the information that your child has access to, monitoring their activity. So that's like the first level, and that is very important. But it only goes so far. Like once they become teenagers, once they grow older, it becomes a lot harder to control them. And at that point, what you really need is a great relationship. And it sounds maybe I don't know how that sounds, like if it sounds too challenging, but the fact is that a relationship is everything. So whether a child is willing to communicate with you, if something like somebody that makes them uncomfortable, or they're in an unsafe situation, do they feel safe talking to you about it? Do they feel safe discussing the situation with you? Because if they do, they're much, much, much more likely to be protected. They're much more likely to not have to not engage in those situations and to actually seek help. And they give you the opportunity to protect them from that unsafe situation. Okay.
So I
Does
think
that answer?
it does, and I guess I'm also now thinking about culturally, especially maybe when you come from a background where maybe that doesn't come as naturally, or maybe that's not the norm. So I guess I'm thinking about, if you are in that background and you are concerned, but maybe you haven't really invested in the relationship with your kids, and now you're seeing some of these things that are going on, maybe not just in the world but in their world. You're seeing and some things that are concerning you. What can you do? Just I know this is very prevalent in Asian cultures, African cultures.
Yes.
It's not something that we can just take for granted.
Yes, actually, the biggest threat to the kids is not just the websites or the external threats. It's actually the fear. What actually gets the kids into trouble in the first place is because they get confused or scared, and they're not sure where to go, and they're afraid of being blamed. Okay, so they're afraid of being blamed if they go to a parent and say, I got this message from this guy, or this person is saying that they're going to send like naked pictures of me, or any of those things that are really, really scary, because so often the blame is placed on them. I for sure, in the Singapore context or the Malaysian context or the Asian context, how many of you can relate to this, where basically if you went to your parent, they'd be like, why are you talking to that person? Why are you on their website? What are you doing on the internet? Who are your friends? Why are they your friends? Why are you hanging out with these people? And it's all your fault for being in that situation. You call it victim shaming, and that, I think, is what stops a lot of children, because they're so scared of getting into trouble. For me, one of the key things that I want with my daughter is to make sure that she knows that she is not in trouble, that I'm a place for her to come to if she is in trouble, but not to get into trouble. That is one of my personal key metrics of success, where I want to support her, where, yeah, if anything happens, if she receives like an unsolicited image, if she feels peer pressure, if she feels any of those things, that she knows that, if she's coming to an adult or coming to me or my husband, that she's not going to get into trouble, that she's going to get support, she's going to get help, she's going to get help to navigate that situation in a way that supports her and acknowledges her.
So we have a comment from Coco, where she is agreeing that a great relationship with our children is crucial. And I think I think more and more, as we think about not just what is cultural, what is normal, what comes naturally to us, but also what is healthy. I think there is a lot of science and research out there. And I think just kind of bringing back what you talked about earlier about maybe even that opportunity you had of growing up, going to an all-girls school, having that opportunity to step up, to speak your voice. So I think part of the challenge is allowing our girls to be strong so that they can be safe. And sometimes, as you said, when women are strong, when they have strong personalities, when they speak up, when they own their voice, when outside of a culture where that's normal, that can be seen as being confrontational. And so a lot of women do tend to shy away from that because we are socialized to be more timid and to hold back.
Yes.
And I think it's really tragic that that actually is robs us not just of our safety, but our strength as well.
Absolutely. And, you know, people pleasing is a thing that a lot of women have, where we're trained to be a good girl, right? To not speak up, to just be quiet, to accept, to make other people happy. And the thing about that is that that's a behavior that actually makes kids vulnerable, makes girls really vulnerable, because when a authority figure or an older person is in their periphery, there's much more likelihood or inclination to agree, or to make the person happy, or to not make them mad, or to do what they're asking. And predators prey on that. They prey on that really, really, really hard. Like a child's inability to say no. Okay. And as a parent, right, here's the thing: as a parent, I know how hard it is to raise a strong child, because they're going to argue, they're going to push back, they're going to say no a lot. I don't want to, I don't feel like it, no. And as a parent, that's a horrible, it's extremely annoying, extremely aggravating, and extremely frustrating when you really want your way. And you really want everything to be smooth and go the way that we want it to, and to have that kind of feedback. And I grew up with that kind of behavior being seen as extremely rude, extremely disrespectful. Like, how dare you? You're not allowed. You're not allowed to actually express your own feelings, your own emotions, you know, or have anything that goes against an authority figure. And that makes it very, very difficult then when a child is faced with those situations, like that predators actually prey on, and count on that you have been socialized enough to just go along with whatever it is they're putting in front of you, right? That you won't fight, that you won't resist, that you, like, if they're asking you for something, that you'll ignore your natural instinct and the discomfort, because it's actually over time. It's actually where parents can actually step in is in their formative years. Whether are we encouraging our children to hear themselves, to hear their own body feedback of, like, this is not making me comfortable. I don't feel like eating anymore. You talk about certain things, especially in early childhood, that seem obvious, but us were raised. Okay, and it doesn't seem connected, right? I don't feel like eating any more food is one of the most easy illustrations of whether we're actually supporting our kids to hear themselves and hear their body cues or not. Okay, so every time we ignore a child when they're saying, like, you know, I'm actually done, I'm finished, I don't want to do that, we are teaching them to ignore their body cues. And when they go out into the internet, when they go out into the digital world, and it's this huge space of a million different points of feedback, million different bits of information, people, you're navigating basically this huge smorgasbord. It is almost impossible to navigate, and it's even harder when you cannot hear your internal voice that's telling you, like, this is not safe, this is not okay, or I don't want to do that. So more importantly than ever, like, teaching children consent, teaching children where their boundaries are, and to respect their own internal compass, their own internal feelings, is extremely important.
I think it also sounds like the idea of building safety into the home, right? So that they are not more afraid of you than they are of going out into the world. And as you said, I think really beginning to establish those boundaries. And I think that's something that can happen at any age. And I think when, as we talk about reawakening the girl within, I think part of that is recognizing how have I been raised? What are some of the things that come so commonly or so naturally to me that maybe I need to go back and re-explore, re-examine, and kind of figure out how is this shaping how I'm behaving today? Because this is, I think, the idea of not saying no, not really understanding consent, not being able to enforce boundaries, is true for girls at any age. I know even for myself, that's still something that I still need to work on somewhat proactively, and keep an eye on, okay, like, am I comfortable? What is making me uncomfortable in this situation? How do I stay safe? Because at the end of the day, I think it really is about navigating the world with confidence, but that requires knowing that you have the strength to navigate the world, but you're also able to keep yourself safe if you do come across dangerous or difficult situations. And I think that's really the power of reawakening and strengthening yourself, so that as you go out and navigate the world, you're able to actually do that with wisdom, and to recognize, as you said, some of those red flags, the danger signals that we often ignore in the pursuit of whether nowadays that's likes, even in the offline world, whether that's forms of respect, wanting to be seen as the good girl, not wanting to step out of line, and I think, especially as we talk about women stepping up, being leaders, I think it's important to know how we interact with the world and how that shapes and influences us. I think it's so important that you brought up just this idea of autonomy and being able to read oneself, and really be able to understand how you are showing up. What are some of the ways that maybe parents can begin to think of that? And maybe even if not parents, like if you are, your own parent and you're like, I need to do this. What are some of those things that we could begin doing? And I know this is, really your area with women empowerment work and your passion in terms of helping women really step up and be everything that they are made to be.
It really is, and it's really important to have that conversation about how we're raising girls, so that we avoid some of the things that we're avoiding some of the things that we deal with as adults. So a lot of us have grown up with all of that baggage. Thankfully, at the time, we didn't have Instagram and Facebook and all of that onslaught, but we are still navigating it. And I probably have hangups that my daughter is not going to have at all. For her, like having YouTube, having Instagram, like having a public persona is something that she's just seeing, and it's like normal for her that this is the case. But for me, it's definitely an area of discomfort, right? Something that I've had to kind of challenge myself with and grow towards. And as women of any age, really getting awareness around our own feelings is one of the biggest things we can do. Okay, if I was to just boil it all the way down, it's actually getting more awareness of, am I comfortable in the situation? Am I not comfortable in the situation? And you know what? I have the right to be uncomfortable. Like, if I am uncomfortable, it is not my own fault. It doesn't have to be my own fault. Very often, the issue that a lot of people, and I think even when they're kids, they think that it's their fault. If they're in a bad situation, if they're in an alley or somebody's trying to take advantage of them, they think that it's their fault. They shouldn't have been out. And most of the time, if they are in that situation, they've probably maybe broken a rule or two. Maybe they said that they were going to be somewhere and they're somewhere else. And now they're in a dangerous situation. and that stops them from asking for help. Okay, and I feel that one of the things that we need to realize when we're dealing with kids who are in trouble, okay, whether they have experienced sexual harassment or they're in what seems to be a bad situation, is that at the end of the day they're vulnerable children. Okay, they're vulnerable children who need help at the end of the day, regardless of what rules they might have broken, regardless of how many times you told them not to do it. They're vulnerable children who don't have fully developed brains, and who need help. Okay, they need somebody who's more aware, who's in a position to help, to be able to help them. And as adults, for us to actually realize that whatever it is we're blaming ourselves for, like the things that we think we shouldn't have done or that make us bad people, because we did X, we did Y, and that makes me a really, really horrible person who's not worthy, or any of the stories that we tell ourselves for why we deserve bad treatment, why we deserve to be blamed, or any of the things that we take on. It's just not true. It's no more true for us as it would be for a child at that point of time. Sorry, Laura, I can't hear you. Something with this thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like one of the keys is learning to distinguish almost like areas of responsibility. What is within my sphere of influence? What can I control? And being able to recognize that as well. So when you are raising strong girls, to know where they need to take responsibility, but also what's beyond their scope. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget as kids, as girls are growing up, that they are little human beings, but they have not yet developed all of the maybe the wisdom, the experience, the capacity to be able to make the decisions that they need to. And sometimes we teach them to be afraid of failure because we are holding them responsible and accountable for things that maybe they need to learn, but can learn in a better way, in a gentler way, so that they don't become paralyzed, they don't take on so much responsibility. I know I'm talking to myself as well, as a lot of the women I talk to do feel this incredible amount of responsibility, sometimes for things that aren't even in their control. And I think that's a great point that you raise. So as we begin to wrap up, and I appreciate all the insights that you've brought into this idea. And I know we've barely touched the surface, right? I think there's just so much that could go wrong with being online, whether that's like with grooming, with trafficking, with child pornography. I think there's a whole lot of things that we need to be aware of, not just for the younger girls, but as older women as well. I know one of my hairdressers was actually trafficked. And so she was telling me this story, and it was just crazy, right? And so I think it's just being aware of the dangers that are out there. But what would your message be as we close to women about reawakening the girl within?
Okay. About internet safety or reawakening the girl within?
Let's start with internet safety, and then reawakening the girl within.
Okay. So like when it comes to internet safety, I think it's something that we cannot take for granted. We just can't, not in today's day and age. It's nice to bury our heads in the sand, but we have to know what are parental controls, like how to work them, we have to have some eye of supervision on what content our children are consuming. We have to engage them, so to be in communication with, hey, right, without the heaviness or significance of like, you're in trouble if you're doing something that I don't like. And this is a real challenge even for myself. But ideally, what we want to create is a relationship of curiosity and trust, where they are communicating and they are sharing with you everything that they're going through. When I was thinking about this topic, I thought of a kid that used to hang out with us when I was a teenager. Okay, and like I said, I hung out with a lot of the what adults would call delinquents, I guess. Um, and she was not. She had healthy parents, like a healthy relationship with her parents. Once we asked her to go out on a Saturday night, and she said, "Oh, I'm going to have dinner with my parents, actually." And we were like, "Oh, that sucks. Like, why would you want to do that?" And she was like, "Actually, I enjoy having dinner with my parents. I like my parents. I like it. I'm going to choose to have dinner with my parents rather than hang out with you guys." And I remember that kind of blowing my mind a little bit, because I was like, "You like your parents? Like, you would choose to have dinner with your parents rather than go out with us on a Saturday night, for real?" But she was also the kid that, would refuse a cigarette, that would not drink, that regardless of what was happening around her, she didn't make those choices. She wasn't subject to peer pressure. And I truly feel that a lot of it was a result of the healthy relationship that she had with her parents, or that it seemed like she had with her parents. And I think that ultimately that is one of the keys that we want to develop. As long as a child is getting what they need from the people around them, from their actual world, the non-digital world, right? So their family, their community, the world outside of the computer. If they have a strong life, they're getting connection, they're getting love, they're getting validation and appreciation and all of these things offline, they will probably be okay and make good choices online. And I truly believe that is the key. And, going into awakening the girl within, I think even for adults, like being in this age where we spend, I don't know, 80-90% of our time online these days, especially since we've been shut in, it is more important than ever not to neglect the world that we are cultivating offline, our relationships with the people around us, our friendships, all of those relationships, and most importantly, our relationship with ourselves, and getting to know the goal within us, as you say, the flaws, the gifts, the positives, the possibilities. And really, I don't actually feel we ever stop having a little girl inside of us. And it's discovering that gifts, discovering that confidence, and allowing that girl to shine ultimately.
Oh, thank you so much, Nadine. I think those are incredibly powerful. So I think the importance of the offline connection, cultivating a self that's offline, that's a healthy self that's offline, and then you bring that and nurture that, and that's what you express in an online world. And again, reconnecting with the girl within, I think, is really key to doing that. I think as I thought about, International Day of the Girl, and, as much as we focus on the young girls, and tomorrow's women, so to speak, I think we need to also talk about today's women, because we are all girls. I think there's so much more potential that we have, that is just waiting for us to unlock, waiting for us to kind of just overcome, step out, and be aware of some of those things. So I really appreciate everything that you've shared, and just really some food for thought that you've brought to the table for us today. So what's next for you? Where do you see yourself in the coming years, as you kind of reawaken the girl within, as you release and explore the world? What does that look like for you?
For me, well, we have just launched the Rebel Coaches. We're in the process of transitioning that, where we really are going to be me and my husband being the we. We're going to be working with rebels, with trailblazers, and people who really want to push the boundaries of what's possible for themselves and really impact communities, right? Like I shared earlier, I've always enjoyed being with kind of the misfits and the people on the fringes and the people who question everything and wonder why society is the way that it is and want to do something about it. Okay, so as coaches, our job is to really bring out the best in people, to support them in finding their inner self, whether it's their inner child, whether it's like their truest and their grandest sense of self, and supporting that to really make an impact in the world and for them to live their purpose. So that's what's coming up in the next year as we build our programs and our coaching.
Fantastic. That sounds really exciting. So where can people connect with you, contact you, and learn more about what you do?
We're still building our website, so stay tuned for that. But you can connect with me on Instagram and on Facebook at Rebel Women Coaching. We'll be coming up with much more material in the months to come. And yeah, so we'll stay tuned and we'll keep you posted.
Fantastic. So, of course, I have to talk about Women in Leadership Limelight because we are hosting this summit. And so with that, part of the focus is leadership isn't just what you see, once you get to the top of the mountain. It's all these steps that you take along the way as you head in the right direction. So we have our pillars of success along what we call our WomenWILL success path. So the first step is embracing your path. The second one is enhancing your skill. Number 3 is empowering your team. And the fourth is embodying your legacy. And so what are your thoughts as women chart the way forward in leadership as they grow along their leadership journey?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
What are your thoughts on charting the way forward for women in leadership?
I think for women to really, really hear themselves, with social media, with everything that is out there, it's very, very loud. You have a million people's opinions and ads screaming at you about how you need to think, how you need to dress, who you need to be as a mom. As like literally, there is no area of our lives, I feel at this point, that is not touched by somebody's opinion. And I do feel that to be a leader, we need to really embrace what makes us unique. We need to recognize that our truth might not be somebody else's truth, and somebody else's truth might not be ours. And our gift to the world is really to bring that, to live that life that makes us feel right without imposing it on other people, and to bring that brilliance. So I feel that the more that women do that, the more they can shine a really bright light and be the leaders that they're meant to be.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nadine. It has been a delight to have you with me this afternoon. I'm just exploring this topic of raising strong girls in a digital world. So we have a couple more sessions coming up after this. So at 4 p.m. So you have about an hour to refresh, have an afternoon snack, and then join me again for a conversation with Lorraine Coimba. So we'll be talking about pain to power. So pathways to transformation, how you can transform your experiences from pain into power. After that, I'll be joined by Imelda Viriri, and we'll be talking about unleashing your power. And I think a lot of those conversations will build on what you have shared, Nadine, because it is about how do you speak up? How do you learn to say no? So Lorraine will be talking about that. And then we'll be talking about how do we develop ourselves, maybe building that boards of advisors, learning to see beyond ourselves and getting that external input so we can see some of those blind spots as we continue to grow and to shape ourselves to become the women that we want to be, and not just, all the voices that tell us who we should be. So thank you very very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Nadine. And we will see you soon. Leave your
Thank
comments.
you so much for having me, Laura.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate everyone who's left their comments below. We want to continue the conversation. So whether you're watching on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube, leave your comments below, and we'd love to connect. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.